Last Sunday morning, I spoke on Outsiders about the disgusting embrace by the Joe Biden administration of the Durban Declaration, one of the most insidious and anti-Semitic documents by the equally insidious, in my opinion, and frequently anti-Semitic United Nations. The Durban Declaration was drawn up in 2001 at a ludicrous event hosted by the United Nations in Durban in South Africa, called the Durban Anti-Racism Conference or some such twaddle. At the time, the world was still rejoicing in the dismantling of the vile apartheid system the previous decade. But rather than using the occasion in Durban to promote goodwill between different races and nations, the Durban Conference instead helped conceive and promote the notion of a brand new apartheid, accusing the democratic state of Israel, the only democracy in the Middle East, of being an apartheid state because of its nightmarish situation with the fanatical demands for a Palestinian state and terrorist entities killing many of its people. Well, the entire Durban Conference and the declaration that followed became infamous for singling out and demonising Israel not once, but over and over again, for imagined crimes and injustices, whilst turning a blind eye to the real perpetrators of genuine and shocking human rights abuses like Iran, China, North Korea, and indeed much of the Islamic world, not to mention Hamas and others. The biggest joke, of course, was that the Durban Conference labelled itself an anti-racist conference, but was riddled with outright anti-Semitism and Jew hatred. This is, of course, now the established pattern, and we see all over the world that those who point an accusing finger and yell racist the loudest are themselves the real racists. Indeed, as I mentioned on Sunday, when celebrations for the 10th anniversary of the Durban Declaration came around in 2011, the Obama administration, to its credit, boycotted the event, describing the Durban Declaration accurately as hateful and anti-Semitic, but proving just how the Biden administration is being run behind the scenes by hardcore Neo-Marxists. A senior member of that administration last week released a statement praising the upcoming 20th anniversary of the adoption of the Durban Declaration and Programme of Action. Jewish organisations were rightly appalled, called the comments morally reprehensible and a UN celebration of anti-Semitism, with one writer concluding that the Biden administration is driven by actual malevolence towards both Israel and Zionism itself, which lowers it into a foul pit of infamy. I was contacted after that editorial by many members not only of the Jewish community but others who were equally outraged that the Biden administration has chosen to embrace this anti-Semitic garbage and, more importantly, hoping that Australia did not intend to follow suit. But there was worse to come during the week. The Daily Telegraph reported that Bob Carr had repeated the disgusting Israel apartheid smear in an email to Labor Party members and pushed a motion passed by Labor's Kogarah branch calling on the next federal Labor government to work with the European Union and the like-minded governments to apply bans to products produced in Israeli settlements, and that Australia should support the work of the International Criminal Court in investigating human rights abuses by the Israeli government. This is disgusting and shameful stuff, in my opinion. Perhaps Mr. Carr would care to book a flight to Durban for the celebrations later in the year. Anyway, on Sunday in my editorial, I urged Australia to not follow the Biden path. After referring to the ridiculous Zoom climate summit that Joe Biden held last week, which was riddled with identity politics and idiotic claims that climate change is fueled by racism, I suggested that, hopefully, Scott Morrison might be waking up to the fact that Joe Biden is a dangerous, hardcore leftist whose ideology should be shunned and avoided at all costs. Obviously, Jenny must have been watching, or perhaps it was Josh. But anyway, I was delighted to read last night that Scott Morrison has announced that Australia will not participate in the 20th anniversary events for the World Conference Against Racism in Durban. The 20th anniversary of Durban. Indeed, Scott Morrison added, we will not associate Australia with one-sided and contentious language that singles out Israel or an event that champions such language. Well done, Prime Minister, and on behalf of the many people who contacted me after that editorial to express their outrage at the Biden administration's embracing of the protocols of Durham. Sorry, slip of the tongue, I meant the Durban Declaration. Thank you, Prime Minister. Let's chalk it up as a victory for common sense and the sort of sound moral principles that sadly are now absent from the White House.